driving in and listening to the radio, and they're like, oh, week 16 in the NFL kicks off tonight. I was like, wow, how did we get to week 16? That's A. And B, 3 games left with a team that's already talking about vacation.
Yeah, life comes at you fast when every game's a car crash.
Oh, my gosh, yeah. Monday night was real bad. I mean, they've all been real bad. And I don't know how anything changes into, I mean, I don't see them winning another game. So.
Boy, you going to say that on ABC 7?
No, probably not as emphatically.
Dionne Miller is with us here.
This is hopeless.
Dionne Miller, the Chicago Bears playing another game. Yeah, they won't win another game, Robbie.
They won't.
Yeah,
they won't.
Yeah, Robbie. There's going to be the head nod and the smile. And yeah, Robbie, they won't win another game.
Right. Well, where's the lie? I don't see any lie in that.
I just don't know why you won't take my advice. Just one little thing.
Go off on the air.
Have that viral moment. We see this across the country. Just one thing where you just say something a little bit different. You know, it throws people off for a minute, but people will agree. If you just said, this is hopeless, Robbie.
This is hopeless. I should say that.
Judy, this is terrible. just say it.
My favorite is when they're like, and Dionne's here, and we're talking Bears. It's like, oh, do we have to?
It's not a bad toss, actually.
I know.
That's not bad,
I know.
actually.
That's actually like pretty accurate.
That's pretty good.
We still are. Yes, we are still talking about the Bears.
Yeah, so a 6.5-point underdog for the game for the Bears and Lions coming up. But I think that where our audience is, and I think where ESPN Chicago is that the games are meaningless at this point in time because you're 4-10. Mm-hmm. And where I am, and I've said this for many weeks now, that Dionne, the whole thing for me is the health and welfare of Caleb Williams.
1,000%.
That's the attraction right now.
No question. And I'm so impressed with him. Yesterday, I thought he handled the questions about dealing with this, like the longest losing streak he's ever been a part of, which I feel like we've said that about every rookie quarterback that's been there. But the way he talked about, his positive self-talk and taking notes and writing down things he wants to work on. And he's like, yeah, it affects me. It bothers me. I appreciated the authenticity of that and him saying, but I understand where I'm at in my career. He's like, I'm not at my best yet. I'll get there. I'm going to progress. There's reason to be optimistic because I know it has to get better. I think he's incredibly mature to be handling all that he's handling right now. And even DJ Moore said, what he's learned about Caleb through all of this is like he keeps showing up and he continues to be himself. I think that's important.
He has no other choice.
Right.
He's got no other choice but to show up because this is what you signed up for. You are in the National Football League. You're supposed to be one of the leaders of the team, and so he has to perform the best of his ability. Now, here, when it comes to him, unfortunately, he's in the same vortex as other quarterbacks that have been here in Chicago, meaning that he just got here. And there's a possibility of him having his third head coach. Definitely going to happen.
Oh, my gosh.
So Eberflus, Thomas Brown, and now whoever this next coach is going to be. That also comes with yet maybe a third offensive coordinator. And the thing that really broke Jay Cutler, besides his demeanor, was that it was PTSD for him to have a different offensive coordinator every other year.
Didn't he go through like 6, 7, something like that?
Probably higher.
Yeah, it might have been closer to 11.
Yeah. Just think about that. That's the fear that I have as a Bears fan, is watching Caleb Williams develop, but yet having different voices in his head about how he's supposed to go about being the quarterback in the National Football League. Mm-hmm. This is what I want. I think this is what most Bears fans want, the consistency of having a head coach, offensive coordinator, and just having the same voices. That way he can progress and the team can progress. The idea that in his first year, he's got to be like a whirlwind, like, wait, this coach is fired and Thomas Brown's going to be gone, and like, that's got to be tough for him.
But the problem is that the Bears have always done this backwards, right? Like they have a coach and he's working with a quarterback. That doesn't work out, so he gets one more quarterback, and then that coach is gone, and now the quarterback is ahead of the coach as far as like their timeline. And then they hire a different head coach, and he's like, well, that's not my quarterback. And so they can't get that cycle fixed across the board. You got to wonder that Caleb Williams is walking in and around Hallis Hall and wondering what we in the media ask all the time. Is it like this everywhere? Like is it? And then you start asking other people around the league and you realize, no, No, it is not.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of dysfunction there that he's having to navigate and finding out in real time as a pro that he's in a situation that is not good. And how is he going to handle that? And knowing that as those coaches walk on and off the field for these games through the last three, knowing that most of them, if not all of them, will be gone.
Yes.
And so now now we're starting all over again, getting to know new people and trying to build that connection and that relationship. I mean, 2 weeks ago, I was so enthusiastic about Thomas Brown. And now I'm just like, okay, well, he can't stay either. I mean, he's a nice guy. Yeah. I love what he says. I like the energy he brings. But he can't stay. I don't think he can stay.
No, he can't stay. And so, Dionne, you probably should have taken the direction from Thomas Brown in his first press conference when he said that I'm accountable for some of the issues with this offense too.
Yeah.
I mean, and pretty much saying, if you think this is bad, well, I was part of this too. I'm glad he said it because you have to blame him for some of this as well. Of course. And so the thought is that, well, this guy has got strong conviction at the podium. He's very direct. You know exactly where he's going. But the thing is that the problems are still there. The team's broken.
Very.
Whether Thomas Brown is the coach or Eberflus it's broken internally. And, Cap had Jalen Johnson on his podcast in the recap on YouTube.com. And Jalen Johnson said as much. He goes, we came to pieces after the Washington game.
Yes.
Which means that they were really never together. If you're that fragile, then that says a lot about this football team.
Well, what I agree with you because that moment was such a turning point, such a pivot for this whole team. And what we didn't know what was going on behind the scenes because Eberflus kept saying, well, the men in the room and we're all this culture and we're pulling in the same direction. And then when that happened, you realize that he didn't have the attention of his team.
Correct.
And he didn't have a handle on what was going on. And then it just unraveled from there. And that's why that moment, Tyreek Stevenson in the wrong spot against the Commanders was the end of the season. I mean, that was the end of the season. It was, and that's why, because now all of the things that were dysfunctional behind the scenes were coming to light.
And because of that, Dionne, if you would have known that the team was going to come to pieces in the Washington game, you just went on vacation.
I would have,
if it was going to be like this, you know what, I'll just leave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm out. I'm checking out now. But I didn't because I kept, and I foolishly kept thinking they're going to figure it out. They're going to figure it out.
Yeah. And now what?
And now what? Now that's going to be how many? I'm really bad at math. What is that? 11 straight losses by the season's
Probably.
done? Yeah.
I would say that there's so much. There's so many questions and so many reports about who the next Bears coach is going to be. But this morning, Jeremy Fowler reported to ESPN that he fully expects that the Bears will interview Cliff Kingsbury to be the next head coach, with a combination of experience, quarterback cachet, and previous work with Caleb Williams. For those that don't know, Cliff Kingsbury is the offensive coordinator for the Washington Commanders. And so there's always been a link that we have talked about with Cliff Kingsbury. Could he be the next head coach for the Bears because of his relationship with Caleb Williams? Well, what I would tell you, Dionne, is that that's an interesting name. But here's the thing. The problems that you cover, that we see as fans is deeper than who wears the headset.
Oh, my gosh, yes.
It's way deeper than that.
It's way deeper than that.
Look, we try to explain this every morning. And I think the rest of us here at ESPN Chicago try to explain to Bears fans that it's more than who's going to be the next head coach that's going to be fired in 3 years or less. It's more than that. It's an infrastructure issue. It starts with George McCaskey and Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles and who's got the power and who's going to be able to select the next head coach. And also it goes to Ryan Poles. Will you be better at your job as far as the draft and free agency? Do you know what kind of target is on the back of Amagaje, the way he played on Monday?
Oh, my gosh.
Now, here's the thing. I'll go with the conversation about how, I don't know, how scattershot and how casual that draft was for the Bears last year, in which, we're going to have a flyer on Amagaje. Not someone from a big school. And if I'm being school biased, I am, because he came from Yale. Come on now, Dionne. If you're looking for an offensive lineman and you know that offensive line is something you got to fix, why that kid?
Because you met him on the golf course and he was you liked his energy. You liked the kind of guy he is. That's awesome. He might be a great guy. He was injured. He could not get on the field until just recently. And he's not ready. He doesn't look ready. And you can't tell if that is just because of inexperience or if he's not being properly prepared? And can the GM truly not evaluate?
I mean, well, that is to be determined. And I will tell you at this point in time, I'm disappointed in what the Bears have out there. Like Caleb Williams, Roma Dunze, of course, that's the future of the football team. But what about the infrastructure around the offensive defensive lines? The draft, when you go back and look at the draft, it's as if the Bears, they've already had a long playoff runs. They're just adding pieces.
I wrote it down when you said it because it is that's the most accurate description of how they handled the draft last year was casual. Like they were just adding pieces here and there because they were so close to winning. Yeah. And that wasn't real. That's not real.
How about this from Amagaje? Said that Caleb won't get touched.
I mean, seriously.
Do you recall this?
I do.
Months ago?
I do.
How about Amagaje? Good old number 72. Let's play that right here with Amagaje. You played him from your side, Jay Moore, because Amagaje said that Caleb is not going to get touched. So when you get a chance, you go ahead and play that. But that I remember that quote.
Yeah.
Very clearly.
I do too. Very clearly.
Yeah.
Well, how's that going to feel?
He won't get touched behind me. I promise you that.
Okay, mark his words, you guys.
Who was that?
You.
That was not me. That was not me. I was not there when he got drafted. That was not me. I was driving back from Detroit.
So just think about
how's that going to feel?
He won't get touched behind me. I promise you that.
Okay, mark his words, you guys.
I'll mark his words. You were a turnstile at the department store.
That was really bad.
That's who you were.
And every time they announced a penalty on offense, it was him. And it was just like, oh, my gosh, of course. We knew that wasn't going to go well.
That's a practice squad player. That's what that is. I know he's pressing the service because of the injury, because of the concussion to Braxton Jones.
In the third round.
But think about what they've done. Caleb and Rome, I think
I could have picked Caleb and Rome.
Yes,
okay?
I'm glad. Well, thanks to Atlanta.
Right, of course.
but Rome and Caleb right there, 1-2. Great.
Yes, great. Awesome.
But there are some that still will criticize, Torrey Taylor being drafted 4 and Austin Booker at 5. People say, a punter. And my thought at the time, I'll tell you, Dionne, was, okay, if it's the best on the board, the best special teams player on the board, go right ahead. But when you think about it, in hindsight, this draft is like, this team's a perennial playoff team. We'll just sprinkle some pieces.
Yes.
And then we'll get back into it.
What?
So,
who said that was okay?
Yeah, especially when you know that the most paramount thing on this football team is the protection of the quarterback.
I mean, that Ryan Poles stood up there after they cut the roster down and said, this is the deepest and most talented offensive line room he's been a part of. Yikes.
He might be right.
Well, that's pretty bad. Pretty bad.
But what if I said to you, Dionne, Cliff Kingsbury is going to be the next coach of the Bears? You'd say.
You didn't cast a wide net. You had one guy, you talked to him once, and you thought, oh, yeah, we really like him. And Shane Waldron called and said that's not always going to work out. Like, you can't just do the first guy that you talk to. You can't just get enamored with this because he's going to say all the right things. You have to truly cast a wide net. Feels like, okay, why don't you get the right coach, like a real coach, like a Mike Vrabel who's going to hold guys accountable and stand up at the podium and be loud and pound his fist on the table and say, we're not going to stand for this anymore, and not find someone that isn't going to be that kind of guy. I think that's what they need, is someone that's a little bit more edgy at the podium, edgy on the sideline, and getting in guys' faces in a different way, and not just being complacent. And when things are falling apart, getting up there and be like, well, I really like the decisions we were making. I don't want that. And that's what this feels like.
Because you're lying to the press and to the fans won't get you far.
No.
Ask Matt Eberflus.
Ask Matt Eberflus. He sounded tone deaf.
Yeah.
By the end. I feel like we've said every time people talk about the top candidates, Ben Johnson or Mike Vrabel, every time we talk about it, I'm like, they're not going to pick one of them. There's no way. I don't think they will. Not unless something drastically changes at Hallis Hall.
I think that Brian Flores and Mike Vrabel will be on the top of my list. That would, for me, because what you're talking about, that DNA that you're talking about,
yes,
those two guys hold
have
it.
That. Yep.
But
there's
who knows?
No way.
But who knows?
Yeah.
So let's go to the phone lines. 312-332-ESPN, 332-3776 is our phone. And we're talking to you about the Bears and talking about the news that broke overnight that Jeremy Fowler said that he fully expects that the Bears will interview Cliff Kingsbury, the OC for the Washington Commanders, to be the next head coach because of his relationship with Caleb Williams. How does that strike you? Again, that's not a name that we've talked about in a few weeks, but that's a name that Fowler has floated out there. So we're getting your opinion about the Chicago Bears, and still to come, some thoughts from Caleb Williams, the quarterback for the Bears, as he looks forward to the matchup against Detroit. Or is he? With Dionne Miller in for Cap, I'm Jay Hood on the Cap and